about today. And in large part, thanks goes to the Plenum Steering Committee, which has now finished its first year of work. And the steering committee and its members have been working very hard over the past year in putting these agendas together and making sure that we have meaningful meetings as we get together as a plenum twice a year. So here are a couple of preliminaries on how we'll proceed today. We deliberately placed at the end of the agenda the panel discussion on how our congregations are adjusting to the pandemic, and most importantly, how we are all planning and working on ideas for shifting back to some in-person activities going forward. Well, while our meetings traditionally end at 2:30 Eastern time, we put the panel discussion at the end of the meeting today so that we can go over past 2:30 if people want. No one is compelled to stay beyond 2:30 Eastern time. Adjust for yourselves wherever you are. But we'll keep the mics open, so to speak, and keep on going until about 3 o'clock Eastern if there's sufficient interest in the topic. And if not, then people can run out and play in the springtime. One or two furthers. Since we will not have a chance for a wrap up necessarily at the end of this meeting, because people may filter away at or after the 2:30 hour, I want to make right now a couple of announcements that I normally would make at the end of the meeting. First is just a reminder that our next plenum meeting will be in late November or possibly early December. The precise date is to be determined, but we'll announce it as soon as we can because we have many other calendar items that have to be synchronized with the plenum meeting as well. But please stay tuned for that because I'll promise in advance there'll be another interesting and exciting meeting. I better keep that promise. Second, we are now only 11 months away from our next Reconstructing Judaism convention. The dates are, and I see Jackie waving at me, March 23 to 27, if I'm correct, and with adjustments around that. Save those dates and get ready for what will be, I hope, a live get together. That will be so welcome after so many months. At that point, it'll be close to 2 years of having celebrated virtually and separately. So again, March 23rd to 27th, Jackie and Tressa and all the crew will be giving us a steady stream of reminders and information over the coming months. Watch for it, sign up. As all of us who were at the last convention know, it is an extraordinary, extraordinary experience that we're looking forward to. And third, in a few weeks, the nomination process will open for rotations for the open seats on the Plenum Steering Committee. The nomination process, just bless us Reconstructionists and our love of process, it's quite complicated. And it's too complicated to waste precious time right now for explaining it. So again, watch your email boxes. We'll be sending out emails in a few weeks with details on the nomination process, and that will unfold over the course of the summer so that we can constitute the new membership on the Plenum Steering Committee next fall. And with that, let's go on to our first really, really interesting topic. And Seth Rosen, the chair of our Board of Governors, and Rabbi Deborah Waxman, the president of Reconstructing Judaism, will talk about the new Reconstructing Judaism strategic plan.
Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you today, with people from across North America. This is one of my favorite convenings, just the breadth and the depth of the participants. It's just really wonderful to be with you. Seth, do you want to say anything before we dive in?
Just the same. I'm grateful to all of you for being here. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to sit with you, and I hope you'll be interested in what we're going to present, and we'll be sure to have some time for questions after. And if we do or don't, I am always happy to talk if anyone wants to reach out to me further after we're done. Deborah.
Thanks, Seth. So I'm going to dive in and talk for a little bit, and at a midpoint, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm making reference to the executive summary of the strategic plan that we distributed earlier this week. So Reconstructing Judaism, we launched this strategic planning process just about a year ago, and we were not necessarily planning on doing that. We had several different planning mechanisms in place, but there were challenges that were really clarified by the pandemic. And we felt them especially acutely before the CARES Act was passed, and it was clear that we would have access to the PPP loans. And to be very forthright with all of you, the pandemic intensified challenges that we were already facing. It didn't create them. That it intensified some financial challenges that Reconstructing Judaism was facing, including the fact that we were struggling with whether or not we had a sufficiently broad enough base of support across the Reconstructionist movement to continue the broad range of activities that we are doing. We had some programmatic challenges. Foremost among them, are we trying to be too many things to too many different people in our efforts to advance a Reconstructionist perspective? I think we had a communications challenge, or more than one. You know, we had questions about, were we succeeding at building up relationships and communicating our impact and our worth to key constituencies? And it was pretty clear that even as there were opportunities embedded within the pandemic, that we needed to really forthrightly confront the challenges, and that we wanted to do it in a deeply strategic way. So we were very, very lucky that we had access to grant funding that was all about capacity building, that would enable us to work with a partner, that this was too hard to do just with using internal resources. So we created a request for a proposal. We talked to several different firms, and then we ultimately engaged Third Plateau, which is a social impact strategy firm that also gives counsel on fundraising, which felt like that was very, very important. And we put together a small and highly functioning and representative committee to begin this work. And I want to, share with you that we put everything on the table, that we felt like if we were going to go into this, we had to really look at everything that we were currently doing, and that if we needed to be making cuts, we wanted to do so in a maximally strategic fashion, rather than out of any kind of panic or out of any other motivation. So, and in the meantime, even as the pandemic is so full of pain and so full of loss, it did also give Reconstructing Judaism and the staff members who work there and the volunteers who work with us many opportunities to demonstrate our worth and to deepen our relationships. And we have been working very hard for 13, 14 months now to take full advantage of those opportunities. Deepening relationships and also collecting data, as much information as we possibly could, to understand who we are reaching, in what ways, what the impact is. So on top of the data that we could provide, additional that we could bring because of deeper engagement in the midst of the pandemic, the firm we were working with, Third Plateau, did a tremendous amount of research, both primary and secondary, that gave us even more information on how we understand ourselves, how we are understood by others in the world. And in the end, after this research process and as the Strategic Planning Committee really dived into our work, we reaffirmed our core commitments and we also moved a new direction. So the plan that we shared, the executive summary, and please let us know if you want to see the full plan, we're happy to share it with you. But it's an internal document. This plan seeks to bring to life both long-standing Reconstructionist commitments and insights, and also our understanding of the opportunities and the realities of the current moment. And we want to bring those together to create a vital Jewish future. I think you all have heard variations on this spiel before. We see radical shifts in the Jewish landscape, in communal life, in spiritual life, in terms of religious affiliation. And we deeply believe that Reconstructing Judaism is well positioned to respond to these changes and to lead into the future. So this strategic plan is a clear path for how the organization can step up into that leadership role. And our goals include connecting more deeply with folks who are already connected to us, and also reaching out and making a new connection with folks who resonate with us, with our values and our approaches, but who don't yet know about us. So the plan is built on 3 pillars. It is about connecting people to one another, the way we're doing this today, and through a variety of different ways. It is about advancing Jewish wisdom and practice, and it is about playing a leadership role in advancing an inclusive vision. And it builds, we believe, on our strengths, our historic strengths around innovation and inclusion, that this is really inherent to what it is to be a Reconstructionist, and that the world in many ways has caught up with our longstanding vision on so many levels, on LGBT inclusion, on ambilineal descent, patrilineal descent, and inclusion of folks who are partnered with non-Jews and more. And so this is this moment for us to build on our commitments and also to move in new directions. So I'm going to share my screen really briefly.
Deborah, can I jump in for a
Absolutely,
second?
John.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I wanted to underscore a couple of things Deborah said. One, to talk about the research and the findings of the research. And it was actually pretty extensive. Third Plateau interviewed about 57 people, either in one-on-one or in focus groups, and sent out surveys. Hopefully all of you saw those. About 550 people responded to those surveys. And that people who responded included both members of affiliated communities and people who access reconstructing Judaism mainly through Ritual Well and Evolve, our flagship online properties. And what was interesting to me about the research, and I think what kind of sums up the plan, is that the people who answered these surveys, even people who access what we provide sitting in their desks by themselves at their computers, that the spiritual need that they most identified was the desire to be in community, that they felt that was the thing most lacking in their lives, and that's what they were looking for. And similarly, people in our congregations obviously the primary thing that drew them into Reconstructionist movement and its organizations was this desire for connection and inclusion. And what all of that made me think, and what's reflected in the plan, is kind of that's our DNA. If you look at what is the history of the Reconstructionist movement, I would argue that it is taking people who have felt that that participation in Jewish communal life, and in particular leadership in Jewish communal life, were not open to them, and bringing those people into community. And that's what and that's been true 100 years ago with the first bat mitzvah, and it's been true with some of the other things that Deborah has named, and that's constantly been the story of the Reconstructionist movement. And what that made clear to me, that research, something I probably knew, but it wasn't until I saw it, is that what these challenges and opportunities that Deborah's alluding to are, how do you at this moment, COVID aside, I think COVID accelerated and made more clear some of the challenges. How do you now I'm hearing fear. How do you serve the function? How do you do the job of bringing people who are looking for community into community? And you do that two ways. One, clearly, is by strengthening our existing communities and empowering them to help each other and help us find ways to be responsive to that need in the current environment, with younger people, with people who feel disaffected, with people who feel like Jewish leadership and Jewish participation haven't been an option for them for so many reasons. And how do you do that for people who are accessing what we have to offer through the internet? And to me, those are the two. That's the hub. That's what this plan is about, and that's what our movement is about. And I think that's why Deborah and I wrote, we think we're uniquely suited to this moment. It's how do you in the current environment, in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, how do we facilitate creating community for the people who are actually looking for that as the greatest need in their spiritual lives? So, a little color.
Beautiful, Seth, beautiful. So I just want to, we want to open it up for questions and comments, but I want to share my screen for 1 second just to kind of walk you through a little bit more than what's in the executive summary. The executive summary does include that we did a new, out of this, we generated a new vision and mission. The vision of a diverse, connected, engaged Judaism that meaningful contributes to a just and compassionate world, and a mission very continuous with what came before. The The nouns and the adjectives are a little bit different, and I think you'll see them when I want to linger a little bit on the theory of change that we did include in the executive summary, because we think it's so great. The mission is that Reconstructing Judaism cultivates, provokes, and inspires a deeply rooted, boldly relevant, and co-created Judaism that provides individuals and communities with tools to lead lives of meaning and joy. So we were able to, on top of that, we spent a lot of time identifying how would we know if we were succeeding, and we came up with this global understanding that like we would be succeeding if we see evidence of a Judaism that works for a lot more Jews and fellow travelers. And we also spent some time articulating where were the points of impact. And Seth just narrated the process by how we came to that. But you'll see that we see these as like overlapping in a Venn diagram, that we long-standing Reconstructionist commitment to influence the community on a communal level, most significantly through congregations like yours, and through collectively to have an impact on the wider world. And one of the things that this plan really refines, and this does have to do significantly with our success with Ritual Well, that we want to focus in on the individual as well. Ritual Well has just under 400,000 unique visitors in this last year, and many of them are participating in learning immersives and are in conversation with us. And our goal is to hopefully engage them and draw them into some expression of communal life. It may be your congregations, it may be something that they create anew, it may be something we haven't imagined yet. But even as we're focusing on the individual, we don't see them as freestanding individuals, but as folks, I think consistent with the Reconstructionist approach, with a deeply Jewish approach, is that we come into our humanity most deeply when we acknowledge our interdependence and our interconnection and join our lot in with other people. And that happens, we believe, most powerfully through some expression of community. So before we turn to the goals, I just want to, and I hope you can see it, I'll make it as big as I can. We're very, very excited about this theory of change. And here you see those I think they're adjectives again, deeply rooted, boldly relevant, and co-created, broken out, and infused through, at the top is our vision. We've got these ways of being, right, that deeply rooted, boldly relevant, and co-created. By that, we mean, we had a lot of conversation about what that language is. What we mean is the extraordinary partnership between lay people and rabbis across the Reconstructionist movement. What we mean is the classic Reconstructionist understanding of the divine as the power that makes for salvation, and we as human beings entering into partnership with the divine in that way and co-creating the reality and the just world that we want to live in. And if you see that all the way through this, and what's kind of cut off on the screen is that there's the vision. The top is the mission, and there's the vision at the bottom. And in all of them, that we see that we want to, in the deeply rooted, we want to create and support spaces where individuals and community can access the richness and depth of Judaism. You see that kind of carried across that low. It's always about that intersection between individuals and communities. And the fourth tier down, you see again and again, rabbis and individuals and communities are that we see that rich intersection, and that's where the co-creation really comes up, that powerful partnership that helps every party be active participants in the process of reconstructing Judaism and feel empowered to build a Jewish future that works for them. And we think that leads to a virtuous circle of a wide and diverse tent of Jews and fellow travelers finding meaning in Judaism, and that individuals and communities together are finding meaning and connection and translating into action in the wider world, thus achieving the vision. So how we propose to do that is through the 5 goals. I'll make it a little smaller again, which were shared in this executive summary with a little bit more language than just what's on the stage. I'm really aware of time, so I think rather than kind of march through them, I'll let them stay on the screen. And Seth, do you want to add anything? And we can open it up for questions and conversation.
The only thing I would add is that that behind these goals, there are are strategies and there are tactics that are designed to help us achieve those goals. But the passing of this plan by the board in March was not the end of the process. That how you bring these things to bear, how you set priorities, how you make how you bring these things to life over the next 5 years. This is not a plan for next Tuesday. Have a lot of work to go, and there are a lot of places where we will want input and conversation and advice and partnership from our congregations and from other other people who participate in the life of the movement, and how we bring this to life. But so we're not reporting to you on a process that's concluded. I think we're reporting to you on or having completed the first stage on that. I think really does bring clarity to our vision and clarity to our focus for the years ahead, and starts the work that we hope to partner with you with to bring that future about. As happy, as Deborah said, for questions, comments. We're also happy to share, if anyone would like to read the full report, the full plan, which is it's about 15 single-space pages. We'd be happy to share it with you. We're, I know people aren't afraid of reading a lot in the Reconstructionist movement, but we thought the
And
summary was
Seth,
a
I
better
see a couple of
start.
hands raised.
Great.
Do you want to field them yourself?
No, why don't, Ed, do you want to?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Cheryl, you're number one on my screen.
Hi. At the beginning, 3 concepts were mentioned, and I didn't get the third one. I know that leadership was mentioned, connection, and then what was the third concept?
I need to be fully transparent and say that I had my second shot yesterday, and I'm a little bit, okay. So the first one was actually about connecting folks to each other. The 3 pillars that this plan is. One is about connecting folks to each other. The second was about advancing Jewish wisdom and practice. And the third, this is what I think you were tracking, was about playing a leadership, the Reconstructionist movement, playing a leadership role in advancing inclusivity. And by that, I think we're focusing in on the 4th goal on racial diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really trying to activate all of the learnings we have about, I'm just writing about this. I'm in the process of updating the entry on Reconstructionism on the Jewish Women's Archives online encyclopedia of Jewish women. And I was talking about drawing on the learnings that we had about creating space for women to move to the center of religious life in Judaism 100 years ago, 90 years ago, 80 years ago. We drew on that with the founding of the college 50 plus years ago. We drew on that in our efforts to center the experience, with that recognition that Jews who married non-Jews were not seeking to exit the Jewish community and to make space for them. We drew on that when we started to admit LGBT, most of it was gay and lesbian at that time, but queer students to the rabbinical college and make space for them in their congregations. And we want to draw on all of that ever enriching knowledge right now to make to help transform the Jewish community around making more space for Jews of color, for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the Jewish community. Jews and also those who are partnered with Jews. The recent statistics show that between 12 and 15% of the Jewish community is already comprised of Jews of color, and that's not necessarily reflected, certainly in our leadership level and or within the walls of organizations, of congregations and other organizations. And as Rabbi Sandra Lawson, who is a 2018 graduate of RC and who just started as our first ever Director of Racial Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, the future is only going to be more Black and more brown. And so this is an effort to really draw on what we know, and in ways that are both searching and joyful, transform ourselves and help the rest of the Jewish community to go through this transformation.
Thank you, Deborah. Before we go on to the next question, just a little mechanical request. Many of you, I think, already figured out with Zoom, you can insert the name of your community after your own name. If you could do that, that'd be fantastic. The way you do it, if you don't know, is if you run your cursor in your own photo to the top right, you'll see 3 dots. Press on the 3 dots, and you'll see a menu choice of rename. And in there, you can type in, along with your name, the name of your community. If you can't figure it out, don't worry about it. But I would ask them when we call on you with a question, just identify your community so everybody knows where you're from. And with that, I think the next up was Lori Krause.
Hi, I have it up here, but I'm Gehila, Israel, Pacific Palisades, California. Really quick question. I think that the presentation you put together, the summary of the strategic plan is great. And I wanted to know, is that something that I can share with my board members?
Absolutely. The only thing I would say, Lori, is that we just sent it off to our communications department to make it look a little nicer.
Okay.
So feel free whenever it's convenient to you, and we'll share it with all of you when we have it looking a little nicer.
I thought it looked good. Okay, good. I think that's something that people on the board would be very interested to see.
So that would be great.
Okay, terrific. Thanks.
Thank you, Lori. And next is John Gerstel.
Hi, guys. Thank you. I agree. I thought the summary was comprehensive and also inspiring. There was one thing that I was thinking about that I didn't really see in there, and it's I think one of the hurdles that we will always face, which is how we, and I don't mean brand ourselves from a marketing sense, but how we differentiate ourselves. And sometimes it's more than just saying, you know, what we stand for, but how do we, because you could see much of the same in some Reform synagogues or some conservative synagogues. And I think to get people to understand what Reconstruction is about, there may be some more nuanced language that we should be using to say who we are that is not something that necessarily would be found in the other movements.
Seth, do you want to take it?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think you're right. And I have to say something I think a lot about these days. And to me, it's that evolutionary imperative, right? It's that Reconstructionists see change and responding to change in the world around us, you know, not as a battle against modernity, but a battle to embrace and respond to change as the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. And I think we need to bring that, you know, into our language more clearly. You know, I think for good or ill, we often lead the way, and it always ends up better for the Jewish people, but it's sometimes rocky along the road. So, but I do think that's the place, and I appreciate your calling that out, and I think we do need to work on how we make that jump. But people really like deeply rooted, boldly relevant, I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think the one thing I would add to that, John, I think it's a great question. And under the sustainable organization, we have some communications goals around helping us continue to refine that and helping all of you continue to refine that in your communities. I think for me, in addition to that forthrightness that Seth was just talking about, that understanding, and I'm not certain I've yet gotten to the place where I can say it in a catchy, quick way, the way that I think deeply rooted, boldly relevant is pretty catchy, is that, you know, what we are doing that makes us really distinct from the reform movement is that we have this commitment to individual and community, and we see them as intertwined. The reform movement was founded on and still really deeply embraces individual autonomy. And I think that the way when we talk about individuals and this understanding of drawing them into community, and this understanding that we're hoping to get people to come to a place that you all know of as congregational members, where you voluntarily submerge some of your own individual autonomy in order to come through for other members of your community, whether it's through your service for something like this, or whether it's just showing up at Minyan, at a Shiva Minyan, or something like that. and that we insist that individuals can bring their full selves into that community life, and that the community therefore must change. It's not about the individuals conforming to some universal standard, but rather that in embracing that wholeness, there has to be that evolution that Seth was just talking about. So I feel I have, since I was 23 years old and started to learn about the Reconstructionist movement, totally inspired by this. I feel like that's the trajectory. How to do that really succinctly and really accessibly, I haven't yet figured out how to, how to put that out in an easy way.
Well, thank you. I think, Matt, you're up next.
Oh, thank you. My comments and questions were similar to the discussion that just got started. I was almost going to take my hand down, but I've got a little bit, maybe a more nuanced version of the question about because I was also wondering how does this new strategic plan, which I really like, by the way, let me start there, but it's hard to find from there ways to explain to someone asking, well, what is this all about? How we're different from the other non-Orthodox movements, and largely reconstructing Judaism is has been wildly successful as a project, and you can see that by the adoption of our practices by so many other movements, which leaves us a little bit less distinct. So in terms of a really concise way to say it, the old language that we had, and I don't know if it's as resonant anymore, but I've always liked the phrase, the past has a vote and not a veto. That's always captured better in fewer words the essence of how I see it working. But the question I've got remaining is and maybe it's all of the above, but is the goal of the plan trying to clarify where Reconstructing Judaism lands within the spectrum of non-Orthodox Judaism writ large, or is it towards supporting our communities that exist and making them stronger and meeting their needs, or reaching out to searchers who haven't found a home and a place, and trying to communicate to them that we might be what they're looking for? And I can see it, the second of those feels like this addresses really well, and maybe the last one a little bit, and the first one not so much.
So I mean, I would say it's all of the above. That that we double down on our commitments to communities. We are thinking about affiliated communities like those represented here at the Reconstructionist Plenum, and we're also imagining that that there are new communal expressions, and that we are where there is wisdom we can offer, and that we can learn from emergent communities that are aligned with our values. So. And we are, as you said, it's a yes and we are interested in engaging individuals, but engaging into really like drawing them into a ladder of engagement and getting them more and more deeply involved. I think I'm going to actually also pivot to what Josh Wirschafter put in the into the chat, asking about budget priorities. As Seth said at the beginning, there are strategies and tactics. And the staff at Reconstructing Judaism is hard at work on articulating an implementation plan that will inform the next year's budget and beyond. So as Seth said, we imagine achieving all of these goals over the next 5 years. Some of them we're already doing. For example, that effort to engage communities and help people connect with each other and individuals, a lot of that for FY22, for next fiscal year, which starts on September 1st, 2021, a lot of that, our energy is really oriented toward convention. And you already heard, Ed play that up. Like that's going to be the primary mechanism where we definitely hope to engage many folks within congregations directly, network you guys together, and possibly also draw in others as well. So and then the following year we will have, because we're doing convention on a quadrennial cycle, the following year we would have a different tactics that we would pursue. Seth, anything you want to add?
I would add something quick. I want to be conscious of the time, and this is again answering the question in the chat from Josh about budget priorities. The other budget priority I would identify, one of the more interesting things that emerged from me from the research and then from the life of as we lived it over the last year, is that one of the things that came out in the research rather than clear is how much people value Reconstructionist rabbis, and how much they're grateful for our training rabbis from Reconstructionist approach. The other thing that's happened over the last couple of years is that our rabbinical school is, after a number of years of not growing, is growing. We had a very healthy class enter the school in September, and I have been on the admissions committee this year and have been doing a lot more interviewing than I had planned on. We will have a robust class next year, which is great, which is wonderful, and which also means that we are competing with other seminaries to provide scholarship and other forms of support for our students who struggle and in my mind, as individuals, bear much too much of the financial cost of educating rabbis. That is and should be a communal obligation. And in my mind, one of the financial priorities for this plan is developing resources that we can use to support people who are going to become wonderful Reconstructionist rabbis through their education, and working with congregations to make sure that there's support for them, that we're paying salaries that are commensurate with the quality and our congregations, that even if you're looking at similarly sized and similarly situated congregations, we're competitive, and we want to work with the community to make sure that these wonderful people who want to become Reconstructionist rabbis can do so without bankrupting themselves in the process. So that's a big priority for me.
So before I move on to the next question, I just want to say that I think Seth is being unduly modest. I think the recent growth just in the past year, and I think what will happen the coming year in the enrollment in our college, is nothing short of impressive, both in absolute terms and relative to other non-Orthodox seminaries. And tremendous credit is owed to everyone involved, from, of course, beginning on the top with Deborah and the administrative staff and the faculty and support from the Board of Governors and from the larger community. It's a fantastic trajectory, and I hope we all can keep it up in the years forward to help continue churning is the wrong word, these remarkable rabbis who really really are the centerpiece of our movement, or a centerpiece of our movement. With that, next question this is a bit of a ringer of a question, or a questioner. It's Mark Overbeck, who's a member of the steering committee, as well as the Board of Governors, and a dear friend of ours. Mark?
Ed, thank you. I'll try not to do a ringing of a question. Just two quick comments. As a member of the Board of Governors, it was privileged to work on aspects of the planning processes. I'm really proud, and I hope that the Plenum members and our congregations can be proud of this document. Many times a 5-year plan is, how do you keep an organization together? And this is so not that. While it does tend to ensuring that we do have a deeply rooted organization from which to do this work, but the integrity of this document against our values, the authenticity of this document really, brilliantly in my view, speaks to a vision of Judaism that is true to who we are as a movement, and articulates a mission of our particular role in helping achieve that vision. And the goals, the 5 goals, there's boldness in those goals. There is depth, sustainability in those goals. To me, this plan really has somehow come together as a stunningly brilliant orientation, set of activities, and really a charge for the movement to ground us. The first comment. And then very quickly, I wanted to also say I'm really struck by some of the conversation here, hearing members of the Plenum express their yearning for something that can speak to the benefits and points of difference of our movement. I think that's something maybe we all have shared. Like, how do we say what Reconstructionism is? And the movement staff have done a lot of work with that, but I'm taking that back from this meeting, and I want to reflect on that more. Is how can we, yeah, how can we empower and enable the those who really are yearning for some great elevator speech, something, whether it's like five phrases that really speak to, for others, what it is to be a Reconstructionist Jew. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Mark. And next up is Ella.
Hi, thank you. Ella Serebraniak, University Synagogue, Irvine, California. Great plan, great presentation, really like that. I will be reporting about it to our board. And I know that people will ask how this strategic plan is different from the plan that we had before. And I can tell that we added co-created to deeply rooted and boldly relevant, and we added fighting racial injustice. But in a nutshell, is it different from what we had before? And my second part of the question is how we're going to finance it.
So I think, thank you so much for the question, Ella. I think in addition, that it leans into our digital properties in a much more, like especially Ritual Well and Evolve, which is Evolve Groundbreaking Jewish Conversations, which is this, it's our online version of the Reconstructionist. It is the place where we're with a real commitment to covenantal conversation, with a real commitment to deep respect across difference, we're working through what does it mean to be to bring a Reconstructionist approach to bear to the most challenging questions. So I think another way that it is different also is leaning more seriously into the digital properties as strategies for engaging individuals along the lines that I was talking about earlier. I think also this plan aims to center camp more than the previous strategic plans have. The camp was represented on the strategic planning committee, and you see it more in the what's not included. And I wonder if we should change the executive summary to make reference to that a little bit more explicitly. But is also kind of ways that camp is both representative of and intertwined into the core issue. So Lori, I might make that change before you share it, because I'm realizing now that that's missing. How are we going to finance it? So that's the critical question. I mean, our assessment is, look, we would absolutely love it if affiliated congregation, more students means more tuition dollars in. And as Seth said, it is, you don't go into the Reconstructionist rabbinate, you don't go to the rabbinate at all, or the Reconstructionist rabbinate to make a lot of money. We also return more of those tuition dollars as scholarships. We would absolutely love it if Reconstructionist communities, that every affiliated community met or even exceeded the 2% of annual operating budget, so that there was more for dues. And at the end of the day, we have an endowment that we aim to manage and steward well, and that we aim to grow where possible. At the end of the day, we think that we're looking at all times as, are there money-making propositions? And indeed, Ritual Well has started to bring in some funds for us right now. It is a service we provide to the larger community, and we do not charge anything for access to it. We have not put it behind a paywall. The learning immersives often have a fee associated with them, but they're sliding, and no one is going to be turned away if they don't have it. So we're looking for ways to bring in additional income, and we think very significantly it's going to happen through philanthropic support. And hopefully we will be able to identify folks from within Reconstructionist communities, Reconstructionists who are located in other places, and fellow travelers, institutional and individual, who will be sufficiently inspired by, sufficiently excited by this vision, that they will join in and provide adequate resources to help bring this to life.
Well, thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Ella, for an excellent 2 questions. And now to wrap up this segment, I think, because we are, of course, running tight on time. A perfect person to wrap it up, another fellow member of our steering committee, Hal Siegel.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Deborah and Seth, for the presentation and for what's obviously a thoughtful and beautifully conceived plan. I do think that one of the biggest issues that we all see out there is the challenge of having younger generations, and by that I mean actually people in their 40s and younger committing, and it's not unique to us as to Reconstructing Judaism, but we do have that challenge. We are echoing what you said earlier, uniquely positioned, I think, or particularly well positioned to reach younger generations and the changing expectations and needs and interests that we see. But I don't see that featured in the executive summary. Maybe the comment about camps, you know, and if you're referring to Havaya and trying to integrate that, you know, or focus on that more. But does the strategic plan overall address what I think many of us feel would be a high priority in making sure we're looking at our long-term and generational survival? If you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it. I think that has to be maybe our highest priority.
Yeah, I can respond. I would say absolutely. And I think if you read the plan, what's there explicitly and implicitly is how do we learn from young people? Not how do we kind of remake ourselves in order to attract them, but how do we draw people into the conversation, either through the digital world or through our communities, to be guided by these emerging expressions of community that are coming out of younger people largely, that really reflect a Reconstructionist viewpoint, whether they know it or not. And how do we put ourselves in a position to nurture those communities and to help them understand, you know, the deeply rooted part. You know, how do we help them to be drawn into the Jewish tradition? And how do we measure that? And how do we think about it? I mean, I don't think in every case it's going to mean more. I'll say it frankly to you all. I don't think in every case it's going to be more young people sitting in our traditional congregations. I think there'll be new expressions of community that we want to try to nurture. We want to help our congregations understand what those are and how they can adapt. But I think at the moment it's a listening mode and a learning mode that'll accomplish that. And I think that's reflected in the plan. The last statistics I saw about Evolve, for example, which I hope you've all looked at, was Evolve's audience has been growing, especially through the pandemic. The largest demographic of people who engage regularly with Evolve are people, particularly women between the age of 25 and 35. So there's something there. I'm not sure we totally understand it, but we can learn from it. Deborah, anything?
No, it's great, Seth. The last thing I want to say just is thank you. It's thrilling that it resonates so deeply. I hear very, very clearly everything that you've raised. I say this to affirm you, not to dismiss you, like to dismiss the comments. The things that you've raised, the Strategic Planning Committee really wrestled with a lot. Some of it is embedded in details further down, and I hear really clearly the request for the elevator speech, and we'll work really hard on that.
The only thing I'll add is I'm happy, as I said at the beginning, I'm happy to talk to anybody. The best way to do that is to send me an email at srosen@reconstructingjudaism.org, and I will be happy to figure out a time we can talk. I'm happy to continue the conversation with anyone who would like to do that.
Well, thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Seth. And I'm sure they will join me in thanking the many, many others who contributed to putting together the strategic plan. It took months, many months to put together with many hands and a great deal of effort. And so what you're seeing is the product of all of their fine work. And it's a living concept, a living document, a living idea. And all the input from today goes into the living and the growth in the plan and the idea. So thank you, everyone. We need to move on to some of the other business of the day. First, we have two formal votes to take today on ratification of appointments to our joint commissions, the Joint Israel Commission and the Tikkun Olam Commission. Before we go into the formal votes, for those of you who may have seen this already in the chat, Rabbi Maurice has confirmed that we have a quorum, so we are able to take those formal votes. And we're going to try to do this as reasonably expeditiously as we can, given all the other business we have on the table. Rest assured that although we will not be talking about the commissions directly today, you've heard from them in recent plenum meetings, each presenting about their work. They will present again in future plenum meetings about their work. And in the meantime, for the important purpose of ratifying new members, which is critically important, you were all given bios on the new members who are proposed using the materials. We'll assume, we hope everybody's read through them and is as enthused as we are about the new members. And without any further ado, I'll ask Rabbi Maurice to carry us forward with the votes.
Okay, so I'm going to launch a poll. Please only vote if you are serving as a plenum rep for your congregation. You should see this poll appear on your screen. If you need to vote a different way, there is another alternative. But first, let me launch the poll on screen for those who are able to vote that way. So that should now be appearing on screen. The other way is to send me a text message. So I'll say my number a couple of times and I'll put it in the chat. That is 541-729-3188. Once again, it's 541-729-3188. We'll give this just a few more moments.
We should design a way to have a musical interlude as we're taking on these votes.
I think
My wife just started humming a nigun.
that's good because I think the Jeopardy music is really expensive.
I just like to know if we can serve beverages to people while they're in line to vote.
All right, so I'm going to
Not in Georgia.
I'm going to end the polling on this first question. This was for the Joint Israel Commission, which I probably should have said out loud. And we have 40 votes in favor and 2 abstentions. So that motion carries. The other poll that I'll be launching in this format is for the nominees for the Tikkun Olam Commission. And let's see. Nope, that's not the right one. Let me try that again. Oh, I see. All right, now you can cast your votes online or at that number I shared before. So we're having a very similar result. We're up to 38 in yes, 1 abstention. From a staffer's perspective, it seems clear that these have passed, and I know we're trying to keep moving forward. So I'll leave the poll open a bit longer, but Ed, if you would like to carry us towards the next thing we're going to do, by all means, I'm ready for that as well.
Great. Well, this is, I think, the perfect segue because we saw just now in real time the mechanics of a simple, ordinary 1 vote per representative vote, which is our default voting system. What we're going to do now is probably reminiscent of those annoying interruptions you see on television about this is only a test. We're going to test our new weighted voting system. As those of you who've been on the plenum for some time will recall, certainly since last fall, we recently adopted an alternative weighted voting system, which will be used under certain circumstances to, in effect, tally our votes on important issues through 2 measures. One will be a continuation of the 1 vote per community voting system, like you just saw demonstrated. But the second vote will be a weighted vote that will be based on a formula relating to the size of our communities, which will accord more weight to the larger communities in the voting process. And just for a very, very oversimplified recap, all of our votes will continue to remain one vote per community, like you just saw, unless one of two things happens. Either number one, the chair has given notice in advance that he or she wishes to have a weighted vote on a topic, or number two, if there's a motion that's made by a certain number of members on the spot, so to speak, in the meeting, to ask for a weighted voted tally in addition to the per capita tally. When something is submitted to weighted voting, whatever the proposition is, it will carry only if it receives a majority of votes counted under both tallies, the per community tally and the weighted voting tally. So for purposes of this exercise, we are going to assume that the chair has called for a weighted vote on a very, very important and potentially controversial topic. And then we're going to conduct a weighted vote based on that topic. Maurice will explain the mechanics of how you'll do that. I'd like to stress again, this is a test. It's a beta test. We fully expect some things may not work right, and that's why we're doing the test, so we can learn and be prepared when we have to take a real weighted vote to get it to run smoothly. So without further ado, Maurice, can you introduce this weighty topic and then the mechanics of how we're going to go about this?
Absolutely. So we're going to be voting on the question, shall Reconstructing Judaism declare apricot-filled hamantaschen as the official Purim snack of the movement? And of course, you're free to vote yes, no, or abstain. However, if this beta test is going to work, there needs to be a majority who voted yes, or there wouldn't be a reason to have a weighted vote. So I'll just let you can chew on that as we move forward. So the way we're going to do this is a little different than the poll where everyone just voted and it was basically anonymous. For this, we actually need to know which congregations are casting their votes. So I am about to post into the chat a link, and this is a link to a SurveyMonkey that is going to ask you for the name of your congregation and its location. That's because some congregations have the same name. And then there's just one question, yes, no, or abstain on apricot flavored hamantaschen being the official snack for Purim of this movement. And then during the next segment of our meeting, there's going to be a panel discussion, and I will collect and tabulate those votes that come in over SurveyMonkey. If you are not able to be on a computer right now, you can use that same number to text me, 541-729-3188. I just need the name of your congregation, its location, and yes, no, or abstain. And I will then be able to come back at you with the tally for the one vote per community way of voting, and then based on the chair having called for a weighted tally as well, you'll be able to see on screen how that translates into the system we set up for allocating weighted votes based on the number of households in each congregation. So feel free to take the next minute or two, or however long you need. You really can vote through, I'll say, half of the next segment, and I will be collecting and tabulating. I thank you. I'll unscreen share.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Maurice. And we will announce the outcome of this important election probably during the course of the panel discussion that's about to come up. So I apologize in advance for interrupting the panel discussion, but I'm sure everybody will be anxious to know whether or not we have an official hamantaschen. I personally, as the chair, I shouldn't be expressing my opinion and putting my finger on the scale, so to speak, but whether you call it apricot or apricot, it is my favorite hamantaschen. So with that, on to I think the real discussion of the day. Here we are, it's late April of 2021. Who to believe when we had our plenum meeting exactly a year ago, we had a panel discussion about adjusting to the pandemic, that we'd be where we are today. Still, most of us are operating mostly remotely, virtually, call it what you want. And whereas a year ago, we were contemplating, oh my, what are we gonna do for the holidays in the fall with this unknown that's called the pandemic. Here we are a year later, and we're all thinking about, oh my, what are we going to do for the holidays? The fall is coming up quickly, and the holidays are early this year with this pandemic. To be sure, so much has changed in the past year in so many ways. And I think we all want to embrace the optimism of the moment, the hopes that between vaccinations and other factors, the picture in the fall will be much better than it was in the past year. But nonetheless, we are still living in a world of uncertainty. And we've assembled together today some leaders from our communities to talk about their thinking, what they're doing. This is part of an ongoing discussion that Reconstructing Judaism, in particular, our Thriving Communities staff have been fostering now for really a few months at this point, and will continue going forward with various groups, including the president's groups and others. And I think it's fair to say that every discussion is different, because with every week that goes by and month that goes by, we have different learning. So view this today as part of a process and a snapshot of thinking of our communities where we are today, with a view that we'll learn more. We encourage everybody to share the thinking that comes out of today with your own communities and back to us, and filter it on back through so we can continue to disseminate information throughout our larger community as we all prepare to meet these, or are meeting these same challenges. So without further ado, we have two panelists who are going to be giving us some brief presentations, and then we're going to open it up for a broad discussion, which again, we'll try to manage using the hands up system that you all handled so well in the last discussion to run it through. And as I said at the beginning of our meeting, although our official meeting time ends at 2:30, we're very happy to keep the Zoom open until at least 3 o'clock so we can continue the discussion for anyone who is so interested. So to start it off, is Amy Gray going to be our first one up, or?
Yes, actually we have three panelists, and I'm asking Jackie for a little bit of an assist on just the moving us from panelist to panelist.
Great. Jackie, you want to take the con?
Sure, thank you. So Amy Gray is the first panelist. Amy is from Ner Shalom in Northern California, and I would like to ask her to begin.
Thank you. So as I think my experiences are probably going to mirror most everyone's experiences in this time. We're just making it up as we go along. None of us have lived through this before. You know, I thought it was going to last maximum 6 months. And so obviously that's not the case. So we have been struggling with how do we do in-person services. People have loved the Zoom services for the most part. We've attracted people from all over the country and internationally, which was an unexpected gift of the pandemic. But as an extrovert, it's been very painful for me to hold board meetings on Zoom and to not be in community physically. And I know we have people who are really missing being together. Originally, we thought we were going to start our in-person services outside on April 30th, which is following Lag BaOmer, which our rabbi tells us, among other things, celebrates the end of plague in Roman times. So we're going, yay, that makes total sense thematically. And as we approached that date, it became more and more problematic. Our services are mainly music. Audio quality is very, very important to our services. And we just could not get our audio working outside. Plus it's cold here in the evenings in Northern California. And we had our flautist saying she's not going to play her flute. We had our guitarist said she's not going to play her guitar. It's just too cold to do music. And so then it was just, you know, we just threw the whole thing out and said, we're still trying to figure it out. So we have the audio issues, and which leads us to think we're going to have to do our first services inside. And then that leads to a whole other ball of wax about vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And we haven't figured that one out either. Our congregation prides itself on being radically inclusive. And so what that means is we don't want to do a situation where we ask for a vaccine card and say you must be vaccinated in order to gather in person. At least some people in our congregation feel that. They feel it's discriminatory, and it's you know, add any word you want to add to that it creates division, it disengages community. We have in Sonoma County, where we're located, a whole coterie of parents who are anti-vaxxers, just generally. And so we have a whole bunch of young families with children who haven't been vaccinated against measles. So then we know those parents and those families are not going to get vaccinated against COVID. So does that mean we're saying those families are not invited because they're absolutely, for whatever reasons, against vaccinations? So I would just say we're in the process of wrestling with all those factors and trying to figure out a middle ground. We, at this point, do not have a date for an in-person service. And our rabbi has just gotten super fond of Zoom services because they're so easy. You just have to roll out of bed and there you are. Our services are usually on Friday nights, and we have an older congregation who don't like to drive at night, so now they have a way to attend. So we're always going to have a Zoom component as we move forward. Right now, we're also looking at High Holy Days, and as Ed mentioned, they're early this year. Will we be able to meet in person as well as on Zoom? We don't know. And the thing I'll end with is that I attended another reopening seminar presented by the local federation. And one thing they said really struck me was that you have to choose your authority. So what they meant by that was the CDC has one set of guidelines. The state of California has another set of guidelines. The Sonoma County Public Health Department has another set of guidelines. Right now, the Sonoma County guidelines are you can't play a wind instrument unless you're masked, which I'd love to see, a wind instrument being played with a mask. I don't know if they thought that through or not, but you have to choose who's your expert. And then say to the congregation, these are the guidelines we're adhering to. And so what he recommended was choose the most local, because they're the ones with the feet on the ground and who are aware of the local situation. So we'll probably go with the folks who said you have to play a wind instrument with a mask, and hopefully those guidelines will be changing soon. So that's it in a nutshell. We're confused.
Amy, thank you so much for sharing the topics that we are all grappling with. I'm in the process of planning a leadership meeting for later this week with the presidents and other leadership of the congregations, and these are the questions that we're asking over and over again, and you laid them out so clearly, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second presenter, we have two more. Our second presenter is Daniel Herman. He's the president of Beth Evergreen in Denver, Colorado. Daniel?
Hi, thank you very much. Welcome. And appreciate the time. I wanted to I'll just briefly provide an overview and then of our organization, and just talk about a few pandemic accelerated strategic initiatives that we're doing. We by the way, are open for in-person service, always have been throughout this, except from March of last year through July 1st of last year, and then Thanksgiving of this year through mid-January of 2021. Other than that, we've been open for hybrid services the entire time, mainly because we focused on adhering to county guidelines. So we've made it available for people to come if they so desire. But we have, as previous presenter mentioned, just incredible participation on Zoom from not only the Denver metropolitan area and our mountain communities, but also throughout the country as well. But at CBE, we're about 175 families, established in 1974. We actually completed a strategic plan started in January of last year before the pandemic, and completed it during the May of last year, so about 5 month period, and really looking to promote the relevance and growth and sustainability of our congregation for the next 3 to 5 years, of which we will be celebrating our Jubilee anniversary. We validated, actually we created a vision of building an innovative Jewish spiritual community, and we kind of tweaked our mission a little bit during that, really having a fostering community and connection in the foothills of Colorado and behind, with lifelong learning, community service, creative worship inspired by Jewish culture and tradition. So we kind of tweaked our mission, we shortened it so it was easier to say, and didn't let the pandemic get in our way, because this is really looking for long term. And actually what we found is that the pandemic accelerated some of the things in our plan that we might have put off for a few years. So let me talk about just 4 things that we implemented this year. One is what we call CBE Everywhere digital membership. And I know that many of the congregations have thought about this and are considering it. And we created this for friends, former members that have moved down the hill or away, extended family members who've been joining us, and others who participate in some of our programs that reside more than 50 miles away from our building location. And our mantra for this is spirituality knows no distance, and to expand meaningful communal engagement beyond our walls and geography. Our membership fee suggested membership fee for this is $360 a year, plus a $36 annual technology fee. In our regular membership, we have a building fee. In our virtual membership, we have a technology fee. And essentially the benefits are all rights and privileges associated with membership, although additional fees may apply for some things. Access to classes, programs, services, social events, reasonable access to rabbinical support and service, reasonable, that we will determine when we get those requests. And then online access to religious school classes and B'nai Mitzvot, and that there's an additional charge for that. So that's a little bit something about CBE Everywhere. The second thing we've done is made technology investments. As was previously mentioned, it's really important if you're doing audio visual and Zoom that it works right. So we have new AV equipment, the cameras, the sound, the mixing boards. We upgraded our Wi-Fi, and hopefully in the next month we'll have a dedicated fiber optic line coming into the building. We contracted for support and production at events. And if someone's having a bar mitzvah or wedding and things like that, that's an additional fee that's associated with that. And then we put in a new member management, customer relationship management, and financial and payroll system, Shul Cloud, QuickBooks, and a cloud-based payroll system called Gusto. That's very easy to use, and we've really cut down the time it takes to do our back office processing. And for the future, we're looking at potentially putting in enhancing broadcasting and podcasting capabilities, upgrading our lighting, both inside as well as outside for our outdoor services, and then improve production capabilities for our new outdoor amphitheater that we're talking about, which is in the works. We're planning a outdoor amphitheater in the rear of the synagogue. We overlook the foothills of Colorado. It's a really beautiful setting. We have wildlife and elk and deer and bear and bobcat and mountain lions sometimes strolling through, so we'll have to deal with that. But we're looking at we've raised, I think, about probably about 60% of the funds for that. We hope to break ground in the next month or two for that outdoor theater that for our own services, events, and also for community events in the Evergreen area as well, because we're, part of our mission is to be a community participant in our own mountain community. And then the final thing is really looking for alternate sources of revenue. Knock on wood, we've done fine during the pandemic. We put together some alternate budgets, and luckily we're tracking. One of our philosophies in our strategic plan is to live within our means and to build our endowment that we are working on. But we've secured grants this year for AV equipment. We submitted a security to the Department of Homeland Security, Homeland Defense. We've engaged an outside party that's finishing off an organizational assessment right now. And that was all grant funded. We've had focused fund development for the amphitheater that I just described. And we're really looking to a big stretch goal, but next 3.5 years for 50th Jubilee anniversary to quadruple our endowment. Right now, our endowment supports about 5% of our operating budget. We hope to increase that substantially. And in the future, we look to do some, continue with grants for other specific initiatives as they arise, and also looking at a program that promotes Jewish cultural identity and instills a connection to Israel and deepens interfaith alliances to help combat anti-Semitism. And that would be a program that would probably be grant funded as well. So that, in a nutshell, is what Congregation Beth Evergreen has been up to during the pandemic. And as you could tell, we've tried to not let it slow us down.
It definitely sounds like it's not slowing you down. Yasha koach for all your hard work. And thank you so much for sharing such wonderful ideas, some of which can be replicated all through our communities. And I wish you well on all the upcoming things to make it even better. Our third presenter is Debbie Rudd, who is the Executive Director of the Society, I always forget, SAJ, Judaism That Stands for All, in Manhattan. Debbie?
Thank you, Jackie and Amy and Dan. Thank you for sharing, some of the confusion and some of the exciting things that are going on around the country. So I am going to share a PowerPoint, a Google Slides as I speak. So if someone can just give me a yay that this is sharing and you're seeing my screen. Yay, I see Jackie nodding. Okay, so I am going to talk for a few minutes about these sort of areas of what we're looking towards in the future. We, of course, this year pivoted to Zoom very quickly. We had members people joining digitally from around the country. And, a lot of, I think, energy that I think we were all surprised by as the year went on and the meaning that people got out of it. But I am going to talk about right now what we're looking for in sort of the hybridization and the mixed / remote in-person kind of thing. So I'm going to talk about our services, our B mitzvahs, our makom, which is our Hebrew school, and our outside rentals from the one-time, one-offs and the ongoing kind of things. So first I'm going to talk about services. And the goal, as others have said, is how to continue to have a meaningful online experience, even when, as time goes on, the majority of people return in person. We all found that Zoom was actually quite meaningful. And, for us, it was very important that the Zoom be an interactive experience, a meeting experience, not a webinar. There was a lot of chat going on during our services. Our Rabbi Lauren Gerbel Herman would talk to people, chat with people or get new names from Mishal Barachs or things that people were celebrating. And that was really vital that went on. And that's a piece that we want to see how we can continue doing that. So in thinking through how we are going to begin to reopen, we had a COVID-19 advisory and reopening task force, which had our clergy, Rabbi Cantor, our board president, a couple of people from our executive committee, and then 3 doctors who are members and have been advising us throughout the year. Each of them have had experience sort of in either frontline kind of work or infectious diseases or kinds of things like that, that they were able to be our advisors. So in thinking about reopening, these are, and I think that some of the things I'm saying have been said and are prevalent across all of our congregations. So of course, Pikuah Nefesh is very important, preserving life and protecting our members, staff, and clergy. The Kihila, which is the community, of course, creating and maintaining joyful and building joyful experiences for the community, whether you're in person with all your friends and peers or at home. And then this issue of shivyon, of equality, right? So the access of equal access for people. So when we are looking towards reopening, and we are doing a trial reopening for our congregation on May 1st, May 8th, May 15th, which will be Zoom and in person. So we had to consider that singing, of course, is still, a risk. So a risk of spreading COVID. So our cantor will remain at home. Our rabbi will be in the sanctuary. It's important that the experience that people have learned over the year and seen from our rabbi, very frontal, right? No mask, remains. So she will not have a mask on in the sanctuary. We will have a camera with long shots and close-ups of her. But everybody else in the sanctuary will have to wear a mask. We are limiting our number of people to 15. We can have many more. I think we can have 3 times that, but we have decided to keep it for this 3-week trial at 15 so that we can monitor it and be ultra safe. Our congregants will sit at the way back of the sanctuary. They have to, in this case, we are requiring a vaccine card, and they have to be 2 weeks past their last vaccine. So we're not holding their cards, but for this trial run, we are requiring it. We will rethink that as time goes on and all of the issues and ethics that go around with that. We are also going to request that people send in a symptom checklist, which will be a Google form, which we'll send to the 15 people who are coming those days. And then if they didn't provide it, they will have to complete a paper form when they arrive at the synagogue. They'll wear their mask their entire time, and they'll sanitize their hands as they enter this sanctuary. For our B mitzvahs, there's a slight little change. People can opt to choose to stick to the past policy of 14 people in the sanctuary, and those people include the immediate family, right? So the parents, the child, those are the 14 people plus our rabbi and our tech person. So they can stick with that, or they can move to a little broader choice of 30 people in the sanctuary. And we're talking about this now because, in fact, we have five B mitzvahs between May and June. So we have 30 people allowed in the sanctuary. All of those people have to be vaccinated, and they have to send a card, and unvaccinated children can only be siblings, cousins, or podmates. I have a lot. My timer just went off at the 5 minutes, and I have other things to review. So I'll sort of wrap it up, kind of quickly. Those are a lot of details. Our Makom Hebrew School, we are working out how we can have them in person in the fall. That is going to be really important, whether it's a rotation of some kids in the building 1 week and some another week. That is a priority to get them back on. Our school is on Saturday mornings. And then, of course, we'll have to talk about whether we're going to be able to serve food. Our outside rentals, we are using similar guidelines to what our congregation is using, with some tweaks for particular needs. We have one group that has 3 people singing, and we are working with them that's important that so they're going to be sort of at one side of the sanctuary. Their small number of congregants, it's a church that we rent to, will be at another side. And also there's a lot of, I guess, legalese, right? That we are not responsible for any sort of spread that happens to them while they're in our building. And then others mentioned the technology piece. And this was, we also have realized, the quality of the video and audio is really vital. So we also will be investing some money in upgrading our cameras. We had just begun to dabble with live stream. Literally, I think it was February 17th was last year was one of our first live stream services. So we've been able to, we were already in that path, and we're going to sort of confirm that and do some installation this summer. It's a huge learning curve of what is what we need, what the quality is, and what the cost is. So sort of that's where we are at with some of those things. From sort of the executive director perspective, it's pulling all these pieces together to make this comfortable for everybody and work and still continue to be a meaningful experience while considering the logistics, the staff, the supplies, the budget, and the spiritual community experience. So thank you for having me, and happy to answer questions if Jackie's offering for questions.
Absolutely. Debbie, thank you so much for sharing such a well thought out process. I hope that it continues to go well, and we look forward to continuing to hear how you move forward. Before we go to the formal panel or the discussion part, are there specific questions for Debbie? Seema, I see your hand up. Is there a specific question for Debbie?
Seema, did you have a question? You're waving off. Yeah, actually, before we go on to the broader Q&A, I thought I'd make a couple of observations on a more global scale. One is we've heard a lot of different suggestions about different approaches among our various communities. We've had a nice cross-section present here today between rural, urban, and somewhere in between. What I think is very clear is every community has its own circumstance, and they differ widely. The imperatives for urban communities are completely different, not completely, but very different from rural communities. In the cities, there's not access to the outside, spaces may be smaller, but it may be warmer, et cetera, et cetera. What I think is really important, because I've heard this buzz filtering around among membership from our community and others, is a little bit like the sibling rivalry things we've all heard from our kids. Well, such and such synagogue is doing this, why can't we do that? I think it's really important for all of us as leaders in our respective communities to transmit the message to all of our membership that we have to be supportive of each other in the larger community and recognize that each community is trying to do the best they can given the circumstances they are dealing with. We should be supportive of each other and not allow pointing to what other communities are doing as an example of what we need to be doing, but rather as ideas of what can be done to optimize the reintroduction of in-person activities given the circumstances in our community. That's number one. Number two, I'd hope to have our own task force chair speak to this group as well, our own meeting at West End Synagogue. We're very fortunate to have an epidemiologist who's on our executive committee and our board, Maris Weber, for those of you who know her. Maris had some excuse this weekend about a bar mitzvah in Massachusetts for her grandson, but we'll put that aside. One innovative idea that Maris implemented, which I think is very similar to what Debbie was talking about, is organizing our task force with 3 subgroups based on, focused on the expertise of our members. So I'm saying this roughly categorized, but I think it makes a lot of sense for a way to organize these things. We have one subgroup that's the physicians, and they're focused on the health-related aspects. We have another subgroup that's comprised of our building experts, architect, engineer, and whatnot. We're focused on what the adequacies or inadequacies of the building and what can be done to adapt. And we have a third subgroup focused on the people issues. What can we do with technology or otherwise to accommodate the needs of all of our membership? And it's an interesting way of thinking about it and taking advantage of the differing forms of expertise we have within the community. With that, I'd like to pass the mic along to Q&A. So Jackie, do you want to call the questions or should I?
I'm happy to let you call the questions. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, thank you. So I think John Christel's up first.
Thanks, Ed. I'm particularly interested in hearing from Debbie or Dan on this regarding whether or not you're requiring a vaccination to come into the building. And my question is, was that a decision by the executive committee, by your board of trustees, or did you widen that decision out to your community to come up with that decision?
This is Debbie. I'll start. It's hard just to say where Dan is, like, so I'm just raising my hand and I'll jump in. So that was really made from this, our task force, which was convened by our rabbi and board president and our executive committee. At this point, it hasn't gone further. And in our communications, it's been very clear that for this 3-week trial and the B mitzvah piece of things through June, that is what we are demanding or requiring. I imagine it may come to a further conversation or a broader conversation as time goes on, but for now, that is where it stopped or began and stopped. It wasn't broader right now.
We don't have a policy on that at all. Yeah, our policy, our philosophy throughout this whole thing has been be careful, but don't limit people that want to come in person if they'd like to. So we don't have a policy. We won't have a policy on vaccinations. It was just part of our core values is inclusivity, and really supported by the rabbi, executive director, and the board executive committee.
Great, thank you.
I would add, I think it's interesting actually that so we have a limit of 15 for each of our 3 Shabbats, but we are not full yet, right? So there are many people who love being at services, but really don't want to yet be in this in-between stage. So while we are requiring vaccine cards, et cetera, I mean, it's not oversold in sort of any way yet, which is, I think, quite interesting.
Well, thank you. We have a number of questions, I see a number of hands that are up, and I'm going to get to each of you in turn. But as promised, the results are in from our test vote. So I said we'd interrupt. We're going to interrupt. And just as a time point for examination experiment, we took the vote by my clock shortly before 2 o'clock. And Rabbi Maurice sent me a chat at 2:30 indicating the results are in. So that'll be some learning for the future as to how long this is going to take for us to tally. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Rabbi Maurice. Then we'll come back in. Everybody whose hand is up, please leave your hand up and we'll get back to your questions in a moment. Maurice?
Hi, can folks hear me? Great. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, and I know I just shared my screen, I'm going to just, because this is a test vote, this actually turned out to be a really wonderful test case, because I'm going to scroll down here. You're going to see first, this is just the per community vote. So we ended up, if this was a per community vote, it would have passed 22-21. However, if you notice, our largest congregations were not thrilled about Apricot, and they sunk it. By calling for a weighted vote on this weighty issue, the tally comes up to 68 against and 53 for. So this would not have passed. I am going to now admit something, which is that actually the real vote was 17 yes and 21 no, which would have meant we wouldn't have had a weighted vote. So sorry for Apricot lovers. This thing never even made it past the first per community vote. And I will never, ever, ever do this on a real vote, but it seemed like a waste of an opportunity for us not to actually see how this could make a difference. So I put my thumb on the scale and made it 22-21. And And then, you can see, at least in a test case, in a theoretical sense, how this played out. Now, one of the nice things about having this kind of spreadsheet be preserved and then be part of the minutes is that, you'll be able to see if there was any error at all in the tabulating of how your congregation voted. But now I hope this was a useful test run.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Maurice, and thank you for that very honest confession of vote fraud. Now we know it actually does exist, but hopefully not everyone it counts. Although I think we're going to debrief after the meeting more about what this involved, but it looks to me like it was a very successful experiment. It shows that the system should be able to work as I think we contemplated when we set it up, and it's very exciting. So thank you for that, and thank you everyone for participating. As an apricot or apricot lover, I am disappointed, but that's democracy. Okay, with that, let's go back to the serious topics. I think, Lori, you're up next. I think you're muted too. Yeah.
So my question's kind of a technical one, how other people are grappling with it. One of the ways that Zoom services have been so successful, I think, is because of the intimacy. So for instance, Friday night services, there's a very large television screen right in front of the bema. And so the clergy are on Zoom with the rest of us, and they're able to interact because the screen's right there. They're able to read the chat very easily. And there's really nothing between you and your clergy. And that's also was very successful high holidays. People felt an intimacy that they usually don't feel in high holidays. So the concern is, once you have people come to services, you're not going to want a big TV screen between the congregation and the bema. We've had live streaming of our services for a long time, and the camera is at the far back of the room, so you just see down there the clergy. I mean, it's not that huge of a room, but even still, it's an extremely different feel. And so we're really, and then the same thing with Torah study, all of these things where the rabbi is sitting there in front of her own computer. So there's that same intimacy. And once you have people back in the room for Torah study, where do you put the camera so that you're not going to interfere with the in-person experience? So that's really something that's being grappled with right now.
So if I can address that. We've been doing that, except for the 2.5 months back last month and for 6 weeks. 6 weeks over the Thanksgiving and New Year's. We have been doing that the whole time. It's been hybrid. So we've allowed up to 25 people. I think we've upped it to 50 recently. Again, to Debbie's point, we haven't been nearly full capacity, but we've had a screen in the back, and then the rabbi is always at the pulpit. And then when we have musical services, the musicians are over there. So, somebody that's on Zoom, the folks that are in Zoom, there are multiple cameras. One's typically in the pulpit of the rabbi or the B'nai Mitzvah. And then there's a wider one for the aliyot and the whole band that comes together and stuff like that. So, and then there's participants out there so they can see what's up on the screen as well. So it's that big screen on actually both sides of the sanctuary is behind the participants.
So if I can answer that for a second. So we are actually doing a trial run with the concept of the screen in the sanctuary, just to see where it might work for us. We had a vendor come in who actually suggested we hang a monitor part of our wall, but that would cost $8,000. So before we do that, we actually literally set up a pipe and drape, which would be like one of those banners. You can replace the banner with a white screen, which is pretty big. So we literally hung a white tablecloth, and are going to have that placement while people are in the sanctuary. So it's similar to what sounds like Dan has been doing. We're going to test it with our congregation. right? So before we're investing the money in this monitor, we're going to put, because our screen had been at the front of the sanctuary when no one was in the sanctuary, the rabbi could see clearly. So we want to see what congregants feel as they're looking at a screen to their, it's going to be on their side, and the rabbi and the cantor, or the rabbi at this point, like looking over to that. So it's like, I mean, I call it, we're rigging this until we decide to invest some money. Yeah, I'm not hearing you, Lori.
Behind the congregation is where the screen goes, or your congregation's looking at the screen at the same time as the rabbi?
Me, Debbie. So if you picture a rectangle, right? The rabbi is at one side, the congregation is opposite her. This screen will be on the short side to the congregation's right and the rabbi's left. More of an angle. The rabbi and the congregation will be both looking at an angle towards the screen.
Okay. So not behind the congregation.
No, not behind. So that the congregants will see the people at home and the rabbis will see, and the rabbi will see the people at home.
For us, what we're considering is at least 2 cameras. One would be the master shot, if you would, and that's going to be from the back of the sanctuary towards the rabbi and the bima. And then we will have a close-up of the rabbi, either through his laptop, which is just going to be in front of him, or another small camera that's focused just on him. And yeah, we're still working on all those particulars, but we do agree that the Zoom experience is very intimate in a way that even a congregational experience in person is not as intimate. So we're very mindful of that as well.
Great. Well, thank you. I think Stephen Fox, you're up next.
So mine's a related question for the hybrid, not for services, but for educational purposes. How has that been working for people? Because it seems that it's very easy to have an intimate relationship with a teacher on Zoom or in person, but when the teacher is trying to teach to both audiences, they seem not to teach to either very well. What's your solution?
This is Dan. I don't know. I know that we've been doing, we were all remote for religious school, and that was really I think a parent's decision. And I don't know how we're doing that or plan to do it in the future, because we'll keep on planning. One of the issues we've had is that a lot of our students live, they live a good distance away. And now that we're reaching out to some other further mountain communities, not only in Colorado, but in other states, how do we do that? So I don't have that answer for you. I do know that there's we're gathering in person next week. Yeah, I believe it's 2 weeks from now, with all the kids gathering in person as the last day of religious school. But I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know how we're doing.
Debbie from New York also has a similar response. We're not quite sure how that's going to work. The only thing I would point out to people, and this came up at I believe it was a Recon Convention conversation, I think, about the sound, right? Like if you're in a room, you want to test all that. There's reverberation if someone's mic is on and someone else's camera's on. There's just all those tech questions that would need to be ironed out if, people, maybe multiple computers are in a room and everybody's still on Zoom, even if they're live, and then they're still zooming in with the people at home, not necessarily a projected, video, but or visual, but you just have to do a lot of testing of the audio piece of that.
We have an additional complication where one of our teachers is deaf. And so she requires people not to have masks so she can read lips. So we're going to ask the students to wear transparent masks. That's the first step in what we're going to try to do. Does anybody have any experience with that?
Janet, did you have?
I have experience with them in my work mode, and you can get these masks that are solid and then just the mouth part is open. If you hold on 1 minute, I may have one here. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know what you're talking about, but how well does that work in the hybrid situation?
they're a little difficult. They're very hot. They're very sweaty, etc. They're not great. I'd say they're about 60% there,
Will kids wear them?
as much as they wear any mask.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. Next up, I think, is Hal Grinberg.
So we rent space from another congregation, and there are 3 congregations in there, as well as a preschool, and there's a regular school meeting in that building just for this year, so that because the building wasn't being used. So I'm wondering how it's getting negotiated. If you rent space out to other people, if anybody else is in that situation where people are going to be in the building together, how is that being negotiated? Are you just setting the rules for this, or are you working together with it, or if you are a renter, and need to do in person, how are you negotiating with the people you rent from to what rules you're going to have?
This is Dan. We have a preschool, and they've been, except for that same period that we weren't meeting, they're meeting in person. The kids are meeting in person. The teachers are there. We haven't changed anything in the lease. That we haven't been asked for anything other than an out clause if they shut down, that we give them forbearance on the rent during that period. That's the only difference that we've made. We had 2 churches also renting our building, but both of them terminated their leases early, although one has reached out to us to say they're interested in restarting again. And I suspect that we might have an early out clause on that, but other than that, we don't have anything special.
Would you assume you would allow them back in? You would have to set terms for how they're going to deal with COVID restrictions?
No, probably not, because that's all governed by the county.
Okay, and are you in the building at the same time?
Not with the church, but we are with the preschool in a different area. Preschool's downstairs, and the only overlap there is that next year when religious school meets in person, they meet where the preschool is one day a week. But the churches don't meet at the same time, or we would be we're in a different part of the building.
We are just now in the final negotiations to rent to a preschool in our building. And we're all using the county health department as our guideline. So all the kids, even the 2-year-olds are wearing masks. Everyone's masked. And then we have, they have restrictions on who can enter the space during business hours. That's part of their protocol. Their parents can't even enter their space during the school. So we're just working with them using the protocols they already have in place, and also what the county has in place.
Well, thank you all. Wendy, I think you're up next.
Thanks. I just want to start by saying I voted no because I like strawberry more than apricot. So I have 2 quick questions. One is, there's been a lot of really wonderful talk about the technology for going hybrid. And I'm wondering if anybody is aware of resources, specifically grant organizations to whom we could apply for grants for filling those technology needs. That's my first question. And my second question, and I think it was you, Debbie, from New York City, who talked about, mentioned the legalese for your rental contracts. Is anybody else concerned about or thinking about a document that you would have members sign regarding like holding harmless the synagogue itself should there be a spreader event? And thanks for taking those questions. And thanks for a great presentation.
Well, when we start having in-person services, we're going to have people sign up through our Ticket Leap account. And we're going to be, depending on how many people sign up, we're going to choose them at random. And we are going to have a hold harmless clause right there that, you know, whatever the legal language is, it's going to be right there on the attendance sign-up sheet, because we're aware that you never know what could happen from in-person things. So that's definitely something we're thinking about. And I would love to know if there are any grants for tech. That's a fabulous question. So I'm anxious for the answer.
On the grants, it's a local. We received a grant for some of the audiovisual. Most of the initial costs that we spent, it was from a local foundation, the Rose Community Foundation. But I would check to see if there are local foundations. There's also, our executive director is really good at finding grants. So if you want to reach out to me, I can put you in touch with her. And, you know, with respect to the other thing of, you know, gathering and holding harmless, our philosophy has been, if you're at risk, don't come. You know, we take all the precautions as appropriate. Now they're loosening up with, you know, limiting the number of people, but we haven't considered that.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And Bobby, I think you're going to be our final question.
Uh-oh, pressure's on.
There you go.
Thank you to everybody for this really great discussion. I have a question about hybrid. So I'm with Lev Hayer in Philadelphia. We're a small community. We're almost exclusively older adults. And we rent space, which currently we don't have any, but that's a separate issue. I have a question about hybrid. So I understand, and I'm thinking about the way SAJ, the way Debbie explained the setup. And it seems easy to me how people on Zoom can communicate to the rabbi and to the people in the sanctuary. However, can the opposite happen where people who are there in person interact with the people on Zoom? I mean, we feel that we've created really tremendous community since we've been on Zoom, and a survey we recently did brought that home. So that's my question. We want to make sure that if we were to do anything like that, that there would be interaction both ways. And I'll throw that out to anybody.
I know from our perspective, it's hard. It's hard because you can communicate on Zoom and do the chat. And then after services, we leave the Zoom open for social hour that a board member on duty will facilitate. And then the folks in, you know, there hasn't been much socialization afterwards because people, you know, situation, but now I think there'll be probably more socialization. I'm not sure you can put those two groups together. I do know when there's a question raised by somebody in the congregation in person, the rabbi or the presenter will repeat that or will be asked to repeat it, but that's the best we've been able to do.
Okay, thanks.
I think there's going to have to be a recognition that it's not going to be 100% for every single person in every single situation. And every person is not going to get the exact same experience either in person or on Zoom that they had throughout the last year. I mean, you asked a really excellent question. To be honest, I assumed the people who are in person will be really happy to be with each other in person. And that will be their feeling, plus watching their friends. They might not be able to chat to their friend and say, you know, nice background, like they made of last week. But I that's kind of my assumption, that they'd be happy with the people in person, and then the people at home would be chatting amongst each other. but
Yeah.
it's
Thanks. That really
definitely-
confirms what we were thinking, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing any ideas that.
And Bobby, I'll actually share not an answer, but a debate on that question, which I've heard discussed. We haven't yet reopened, so for us, it's all academic. But one concern that was expressed is people who will be present physically in the sanctuary wanting to participate in the Zoom chats. Some people were saying they could use their phones. Other people were worried they could be using their phones. Since in normal times, regardless of one's level of observance, I think from a social perspective, it's deemed to be rightfully so, and it's unacceptable to use your phone during services.
Yeah.
Should that be allowed in a hybrid environment? It's a question.
It
We don't have
becomes
an
very
answer.
complicated.
Yeah.
It just becomes complicated. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed.
And I guess that for me, the question is, when we were all together in person, was there much chatting going on? I mean, usually if you were chatting, talking to someone next to you, but there wasn't like wholesale, chatting congregationally. And it never was a part of services, at least at our place. People were engaged in the service. So, to be able to have that kind of interactivity, we might have to give it up during in-person services, but in the hybrid, that obviously could continue as a new custom.
Well, this is a fantastic conversation. We're nudging up on 3 o'clock right now. And I know that Dr. Tressa Grauer, who leads our Thriving Communities section, has a few wrap-up comments to offer us. And then I'll do the final wrap, and we'll let everybody get on with their Sunday.
Thanks, Ed. So I am just so delighted to hear this conversation and so appreciative of what I'm hearing. I just want to reflect what is so apparent, that as a group of Reconstructionists, all of you are experimenting and reconstructing what your experience of service going is looking like, has looked like, and are sharing ideas. And so what I want to just make sure that you all know about is that our team has been running a series of calls throughout this pandemic since the beginning for our communities in order to talk together about these kinds of questions. So since last March, and where we were meeting every week, to where we're meeting at least once a month at this point, whether it's president, we started out having conversations just for presidents, and then just for educators, and just for executive directors. We've now, because the questions are relevant to so many different people in so many different roles in our congregations, we're calling these calls leadership calls. So anyone who wants to participate in conversations about these kinds of questions can join. And I will make sure to add the plenum to the list of invitations for these calls. Many of you get them already. Many of you are presidents or serving in a role where you're receiving these invitations in any case. But we have had calls specifically about the question of hybrid. We have had calls specifically about the question of digital membership. We have had calls specifically about uses of technology. We've had conversations where folks are sharing about how you maintain community, like what are strategies for the maintenance of community. So the kinds of things that are coming up, we are talking about and we are tracking. And as you can see, and in these conversations, the answers are evolving. It's not like there's one answer and you just have to hear it, right? It's the questions and figuring out what the values are of your community and what the needs are of your community and what the specifics are of your local guidance. It's a whole combination of factors. But I would say that the calls have provided this kind of opportunity to hear from other people what they're doing and to ask questions of each other. And then also, I'm starting to think that our role is largely shadchan, like we're the matchmakers also. So where we can say, trying to remember who asked the question about rental space. Hal, I think Hal asked a question and Dan had an answer. Like, Hal and Dan, you guys should talk to each other offline, right? It's not that other folks don't want to know that, but where you have a specific question, there are people in this community who have specific answers. And so, we can make those connections. We're tracking and trying to think with our liaison minds, who's working with which congregations, who would be the right people for you to be talking to. So please don't hesitate to reach out when you have questions. the listservs are functioning in that way, because there are such specific questions. Where does the screen go, right? How do we make that work, right? And sometimes it's get the tech person in your congregation together with the tech person in this other congregation across the country. So being able to figure out who are the right people to talk to each other, please just let us, the Thriving Communities team, your liaison, your congregational liaison know, because we can sometimes help.
Well, thank you, Teresa, and thank you everyone for what's been an outstanding meeting. We appreciate all your great thoughts and energy you've brought to the different topics we've had today, and even to our voting mechanism. It's been a wonderful way to start my Sunday. So I hope you all have a wonderful remainder of your weekend. And I look forward to seeing you again on the screen sometime soon, certainly in the fall. And very much look forward to seeing many of you together, most of you together, less than a year from now. All right, everyone. Many thanks.
Healthy. Take care.
See you all later. Thank you all.
Thank you all.